as well as all the students and the guests who are watching on Zoom. And we are very happy to welcome back to the satsang Swamini Svatma Vidyananda Saraswati, who started the program last night on Shreyas and Prayas, lessons from the Katha Upanishad. And we'll introduce her again for those who were not here last night. So, Swamini Svatma Vidyananda Saraswati, PhD, is a widely recognized scholar of Advaita Vedanta, teaching internationally through lectures and seminars. She's a disciple of Pujya Shri Swami Dayanandaji Saraswati and is known for her expertise in interreligious engagement and Advaita Vedanta. She is the Acharya of Arsha Vijnana Gurukulam and its centers throughout the United States. As a founding member of the Global Women's Peace Initiative, Swamini Svatma Vidyananda has traveled throughout the world to address the challenges that face humanity on a global scale, ranging from climate change to religious and social unrest. Relating ancient wisdom to modern times, she draws from the spiritual knowledge found within the central text of the Hindu tradition. And she's a very close friend of our ashram. For a few years, she's been coming regularly to present on site with a group of her students. And since the pandemic, she's been very generous to offer her time and energy to present on Zoom. So this is already the second program this year, and we are very happy to welcome her. So let us give a warm welcome to Swamini Svatma Vidyananda Saraswati.
Thanks to Rukmini Chaitanya and for all the people in the Shivananda ashram who work so hard, sincerely, and diligently to host these programs and keep people on the path to moksha. ॐ नमो भगवते वैवस्वताय मृत्यवे ब्रह्मविद्याचार्याय नचिकेतसे च. This is a prayer, a small prayer crafted by Adi Shankaracharya, that is traditionally chanted before any mention of the Kathopanishad, before we teach the Kathopanishad. And it is honoring. It says, Om Namo Bhagavate Namaha, my salutations unto who? Vaivasvataya Mrityave, unto Lord Yama, who is the Adhishthana Devata, the presiding deity of death and all endings. And then, who comes from the lineage of Vivaswan, and then Vaivasvataya Mrityave, and who in this Upanishad is Acharya. Acharya means Acharya means the teacher, the preceptor, the guru. Acharya of what? These days the word guru is used very loosely. You can have dance guru, singing guru, ballroom guru, cha 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 guru, stock market guru. So many gurus are there, so little time, but therefore Adi Shankara, anticipating this perhaps thousands of years ago, clarifies which kind of acharya. Brahmavidya acharya. Brahmavidya acharya. Brahmavidyayaha acharya. So the teacher of the knowledge, vidya, that says that you are non-separate from Bhagavan, that you are Brahman, that consciousness which pervades the whole universe, and which is the only thing there is, knowing which there is freedom from sorrow, fear, and all afflictions. So Brahma Vidyacharyaya Namaha, Om Namaha, Om, a sound of blessing, and also a symbol, that is a sound symbol that is loaded with all kinds of meanings in the Upanishad. And in fact, when Lord Yama is asked to teach the Upanishad and finally he gets round to it, he says, I'll be very brief and teach you this Brahma Vidya, Om iti etat. He just gives a one word, one word teaching. And then the rest of the Upanishad is unpacking that one, one word. Om. And so, therefore, this prayer that is generally chanted also begins with Om. Because Om is the Lord, Om is a word that means the Lord. Om is a word that includes the Jagat, because you cannot think of the Lord without thinking of the universe, and the universe, of course, includes you. And Om is also the word that transcends the the creator created dyad, the Jagat and the cause of the Jagat, all that is swallowed up, because Om is that Brahman, that consciousness, over which the whole universe is as though superimposed. The body is a superimposition, the mind is superimposed, as it were. And so this is, so therefore we begin with Om. Om Namo Namaha, my surrender, my salutation to the Lord, because the teacher, the Lord Yama, is of course the Lord. He is a manifestation of Bhagavan who takes care of endings, and we need we need the Lord with this kind of a function, because we don't know when to stop. We want things to keep on continuing. We want all the useless things to keep on continuing. So Bhagavan here is Antaka, the one who puts an end to things that need to go. And then Om Namo Bhagavate, unto the Lord, who, Vaivasvataya Mrityave, Vivasvan Mrityu, the Lord in the form of death, who is Brahma Vidyacharya, Acharya, unto that Namaha. And then we also say Namaha to little tiny 8-year old Nachiketa. Nachiketa se cha Namaha. Why do you say Namaha to Nachiketa? As we will see, we honor his jignasa, his desire to know. We honor his perseverance in asking questions of Lord Yama. We honor his dedication, his commitment, his tyaga, his ability to renounce everything for the sake of this knowledge. And above all, we honor the Guru Shishya Parampara, the lineage of the teacher and student. And if there was no Nachiketa, Lord Yama would have had no pressure to teach. And we would not have got this Upanishad. So we begin with this prayer, and then we will be chanting it every morning, every day, morning and evening, before the satsangs, so that one is approaching the knowledge from a mind that is with the right attitude, the mind that is equipped with the right attitude. So, with these words, let us jump into the business that we started yesterday of discerning what is this prayas, what is this shreyas. So, we saw that the prayas is that which greets you. Prayas means desirable, pleasurable. So, prayas is that which greets you as soon as you open your eyes. You look around, and each item is an object of pleasure. No, no, no. How can you say each item is an object of pleasure? Sometimes I wake up in the morning, and the first thing I look at is a list of things I have to do, which I have put on the which I have put on a board with a marker, and seeing that, immediately I am dejected, and immediately I want to turn over and go to sleep. How can you say it's an object of delight? How can you say all things in the world are an object of delight? Well, they are. Why? Because either they are an object of delight by their presence, like you wake up and you see your pet cat or dog, and oh, how cute! It is waking me up. It cannot live without me. It needs me. It's directly an object of delight. And then you see something you wish you had not seen, and then you want to unsee it. Unseeing it makes you delighted. You see, so that, so therefore, even unloved things are an object of love by their absence. So everything in the world is an object of delight either by its presence or by its absence. And relating to this object of delight is really the pursuit of prayers. Constantly wanting something that one doesn't have, pray yes, and then keeping everything that I already have gained with so much difficulty, pray yes, getting rid of what I don't want, which has snuck in when I was not looking, pray yes, and then keeping at bay things I really don't want, starting with gray hair, pot belly, and creaking joints, all these things, pray yes. And then in order to, keep all these things at bay, what does the person do? Antioxidants, keep on eating berries, pray yes. So this is all. So the moment you wake up, prayers faces you. All the objects of delight, either through their presence or through their absence, they approach you. And then what happens? The person gets embroiled in these objects because these objects have a name, have a form, and they are discernible in the sense that they are objectifiable by the sense organs and the mind, inference, etc. And so even something may not be discernible by the five senses, like an ambition in life to be the best at what you do. That is not easily objectifiable, but it is objectifiable because you're able to observe that recurrent thought every single day. Therefore, it is objectifiable. And it is called, in Sanskrit, it is called Sakshi Pratyaksha, objectified by the witness of the mind. When you witness the mind, it is objectifiable. So, prayers is plenty everywhere. That which is pleasurable, either by its presence or by its absence, surrounds you. Like what? Unfortunately, like the seaweeds in the ocean of samsara, entangled in which it is difficult to extricate yourself, it is difficult to emerge. And that is why the Upanishad is needed, because it's a strange kind of entanglement. When you look closely into this entanglement, there seems to be something amiss which one cannot have a handle on. And so let us look at this entanglement. At first, the object, and remember the object, when I say object, it means people, situation, events, notions, beliefs, all of them. So at first whatever confronts you seems like something small, something that you want to conquer and grasp in order to, quote unquote, become calm, shanti, in order to gain shanti, peace, in order to gain ananda, happiness, in order to gain some kind of a contentment. This is what one wants, and this is what one feels that this object can give me. So, first one is pursuing the objects, and then the entanglement happens because as one grasps the object, what happens? Two things happen. One is that the object destroys itself, self destructs sooner or later. And in Sanskrit, this is called Drishtanashta Swabhava. A nature of all objects is such that as soon as you look at them, they wither, they go away, they die away. In other words, all the pursuits in life that are discernible, that you can grasp and objectify, are finite. They end up destroying themselves. That's the first thing we need to know about the pursuits of that which is considered by the Upanishad as pleasurable. They give pleasure, but for a fleeting small amount of time, and they self destruct after that. In other words, they are finite. And the second thing we need to know very clearly about the objects is that the pursuit, in the beginning, you are the pursuer. You are chasing after the object. Situation, events, people, notions, beliefs, ambitions, anything. In the beginning, you are the active agent of pursuing this object of delight. And then later, what happens? Very soon, the tables are turned, and the more one clings to the object for self approval, the lesser is the freedom of the person being an agent here. The person becomes enslaved by the very object that the person wanted to enslave, if for the sake of one's delight, happiness, satisfaction, shanti, etc. You see how quickly the tables are turned? That's what happens. So you think, oh, the ocean of samsara looks so calm and placid today. I'll go for a little swim, an invigorating swim. And then what? Before that, you are engulfed by a tsunami. This is what happens. And so these are the two things that we have to become very, very, very clear about. The finite nature of that which is called pleasurable, preyaha, preyas, and then the clinging nature of the individual who pursues these objects that are come under the rubric called prayas, because of which the person gets enslaved, addicted, and dependent upon those objects for a sense of identity, for a sense of self, for a sense of security. These are the two problems. This is why the pursuit of objects leads one to various dead ends. It's like when somebody doesn't know where, they're driving in a strange town, a new place. Then you think that, okay, let me take a left turn. You're just about to take a left turn, there is a sign that greets you, dead end. And you've already kind of turned before you see the sign, which was hidden perhaps by the foliage of the trees. Then what do? Then you turn around, you make a U turn, and then take the next one. The next one also, no exit, dead end, dead end. And then you can replace the sign that says dead end with the word pray yes. This is what it is. Prayas is equal to dead end, that leaves you deadened to life. Deadened, jaded, faded, jiva. Jiva means the individual who feels I'm separate from everything else. This is, this is a very strange thing. So the whole life is one dead end after another dead end, leaving one exhausted and disappointed. Exhausted, why? Because the pursuit is tiring. There is ayasa involved. Ayasa means exertion, mental mental exertion, physical exertion, emotional exertion. One is drained. This is what happens if imagine you're driving around for an entire day, just greeting one dead end after another, and then after that, ending up in the same place where you started. Of course, it is draining physically. The battery has gone and it is draining mentally because you start questioning your own sanity, as you should. Really, that's what the Upanishad is going to tell. And then emotionally, it's draining because the last time I pursued this, I was at a dead end. This time also, I'm at a dead end. Next time also, there may be a dead end. There is a sense of hopelessness. And even though these kinds of situations sound dire, I mean, hopelessness, exhaustion, mental, emotional exertion, questioning one's sanity, etc. These sound like very scary situations. But in the spiritual, realm, we celebrate this state of affairs. We say, "Oh, yay! This is wonderful." Why? Because until and unless one is completely fed up of the state of affairs, there is no impetus for there to initiate some change. Because I told you, the choice of prayers is a default choice. And if you want something better, if you want something special, you have to order it separately. Shreyas is not part of the menu. You have to go ask for it. It is there, but it is not advertised. You have to ask for it and then you have to pay for it. Oh, I thought Shreyas was free. No, you have to pay for it with your discernment, with developing vairagya. All this we will see. Vairagya means dispassion, objectivity, and a de-addiction, and agreeing to sign up for a de-addiction program from prayers. This is what it costs extra. So this is not part of the stock staple diet in the menu. Shreyas is not there. And look at the paradox here. Until one is sick of prayers, the Shreyas cannot be asked for. And when will one be sick of prayers? After keep being addicted to prayers for what seems like forever and ever and ever. Then only one is sick of prayers. Until one becomes sick of prayers, Shreyas doesn't even appear as a possibility. Because, as I said, prayers is the default choice. And for Shreyas to appear as a possibility, one has to one has to emerge from the grip of the objects and all kinds of finite things, the addiction to finite things, at least for a moment. Glub, glub, one has to come up for air. And then prayas is a possibility. Sorry, Shreyas is a possibility. But where is this Shreyas? What does it look like? What is the color? What is its size? Is it like a small bunny or a little kitten fur ball that I can have and hold and pet? And or is it like my favorite food? Maybe, if you're Indian, it might be gulab jamun, or it could be, of course, chocolate cake or ice cream. Is it like that? Or for the music buffs, is it like a wonderful melodious tune? What is this, Shreyas? What does it look like? More importantly, where is it? And here is where there needs lots of grace. Anugraha is needed. You know why? Because this is again a very big paradox in Vedanta. The one who is searching for this Shreyas is the embodiment of Shreyas. Who, me? I was looking for here. I was looking over there. I was looking above. I was looking below. I was looking on all sides. No, no, no. The content, the nature of the looker upper of Shreyas is that which one seeks. And what is it that I'm seeking? Remind me again. What you are seeking is freedom from seeking prayers. Freedom from chasing after each and every dead end is exactly what you're seeking. You're seeking sanity, you're seeking a sense of peace, shanti, you're seeking contentment, you are seeking freedom from constraints, limitlessness. And all that prayers cannot give. In fact, the realm of samsara, with the grace of Bhagavan and the ability to question one's sanity, pushes the eject button so that prayers, the pursuit of prayers, is no longer a possibility. Because one is all too aware of how sickening it makes you feel. You are heartsick because you are caught up in this realm of seeking. And Shreyas is freedom from seeking. Freedom from seeking. Why do I need freedom from seeking itself? Because I'm seeking something that I already have. I'm seeking something that I already possess. What kind of a madness is it? That is what is called being possessed by other than by everything other than Shreyas. And being centered on you, it is not objectifiable. You cannot hold it. It is not a bunny. It is not a kitten. It is not something that you can touch or hold. It doesn't have a parimana, a size, a measure. Neither does it have a location. It is to the left. I just saw it, but being very elusive, now it is over here. No, because when you look for a location, you are looking for space, a particular corner of space. And when you're asking, when will I reach Shreyas, you're looking for something that is bound by time. So the eyes of the looker, the seeker of Shreyas, are still vitiated with the orientation of time and space. Because when one was in prayers, when one was into the pursuit of prayers, one was aware of time and space. That's why the frenetic energy to get something that I want before somebody else gets to it. That's why the chase, the ambition, the cutthroat competition, the scarcity mentality, because it is here and there's only less of it, and because it has a particular size and it's in a particular location, I have to get there before somebody else does. This is what is the orientation of the hunter gatherer. That orientation hasn't gone still. And so the hunter gatherer orientation, the hunter has stopped hunting because now the person is into Shreyas. The gatherer has stopped gathering all kinds of things to make one happy. But that orientation of the hunter gatherer is still very much with the person. And therefore one approaches Shreyas with that same time bound, space bound, object bound mentality. Avachinna mentality, a mentality of limitation, that everything that I seek is bound by space, time, and being a particular object. Deshatah, kalatah, vastutah, parichinnaha. Everything that I have sought so far is limited by time, is limited by space, is limited by being a particular object and not another object. And the same orientation one happily and unknowingly brings into what? Shreyas pursuit. And you see, there is a contradiction. Because if Shreyas is you, if Shreyas is the ultimate, if Shreyas is the preferable one of the two choices, Preyas pleasurable but Shreyas lasting, and if Shreyas is the opposite of Preyas, it is infinite, whereas Preyas is finite, and it doesn't ensnare you and make you a slave because it is not other than you. So you can preside and reside in your own glory if you choose Shreyas. But then, if the orientation is that of a hunter and gatherer, one will be again caught in preyas because you have preyasified. Is that a word? Now it is. Okay. You have preyasified Shreyas. You have basically tried to gain this Shreyas, this glory promised by the Shastra, this freedom from sorrow, which is centered on you, also called moksha, freedom from being a forever seeker. And if this is also approached with the same mentality with which one approaches all the objects in the universe, then we just have to say Om Namaha. That's all. Because that also will lead you to a dead end. And therefore, we need a lot of grace, the grace of Bhagavan, to be led to the right kind of seeking. This also is a seeking. Shreyas is a seeking, yes, because it doesn't happen by default. This doesn't happen by default. You have to order it, as I said, separately. It is not part of the stock menu. But here you have to actively choose it. It's an active and a valid, and in fact, I would go so far as to say it's the only pursuit in life. This is the beauty of Vedanta. We always begin with two and then we end up in one. So, in the beginning, we say there are two choices. You have to make the correct choice. You have to choose Shreyas. And in the end, we reveal this is Indian magic. We reveal that without any long sleeves or sleight of hand, right there in front of the audience, that without making the two go away, your vision is changed so that you see all that is there is one. Oh really? Yeah, this is a sneak preview to the last class. Preyas is also Shreyas. Oh, I don't think I'm ready for it. That's why it's a sneak, it's a pre-cap. Okay, yeah. So that means Shreyas is Preyas. Nah, no, no. Because all that is there is Shreyas. And if I'm saying Shreyas is limitless, and if that's all that there is, and of course Preyas has to be included. But for the sake of clarity, for the sake of the person who has just begun to seek, this separation is important. This is mainly a cognitive pursuit. So the separation is also cognitive for the sake of clearly understanding what is it that I'm eschewing and putting on the side, and what is it that I have to go after. And then what? So now, so the grace of Bhagavan is needed, lot of prayers are needed. That's why people who are into Vedanta have to start, I have to start praying a lot for this grace to search correctly, to drop the hunter gatherer mentality, to be able to discern what is it that is hitam, what is it that is good for me, what is it that I really want. And then the next thing that is needed is the ability called viveka, the discernment. if Shreyas is already me, that means it is already existent. Correct? How can you say it is existent? Now, this is what should I say? Class work. Pinch yourself. And if you say ow, that means what? You can say I am, I exist. And if you are existing, that means what? That means you are there. You don't need to even pinch yourself to say I am existent. Because if I just ask you a simple question, are you here? Yes, I am here. I am. And if you say, yes, I am, what kind of an existence is it? Is it the same, for example, is it the same kind of existence like that of a pot? You exist, pot also exists. Ko bhedah. What is the difference? The difference is very clear. You say to the, you say to me, this is a pot. You can imagine a pot, okay? This is a pot in the palm of my hand. You tell me. In other words, you are the cognizer of the pot. The pot depends upon you for its existence. You exist, correct? Pot also exists, correct? But the pot depends on you for its existence. Because if you were not there to say, this is pot, then the pot has no way of coming to light. Now we are happily swimming in the waters of Zen Buddhism because we are reminded of that famous koan. What is that? What is that one? If the redwood tree falls in the forest, will it make a sound? And if you bring in some sabha, an assembly of scientists and spiritual people, you will have a very interesting debate, because the physicists will say, of course it will make a sound, because the velocity of the fall and this kind of a crashing noise, and you can even predict the decibels of how much the noise will be. Of course it will make a sound. And the Vedantin is just letting the scientist talk, very quietly sitting there. What do you think? Well, the Vedantin will say, without a pair of ears to cognize a sound, can a sound be called a sound if it is not heard? Then, then you have a head scratching moment. What is the definition of sound? That which is heard is a sound. And who is the hearer? This conscious being. I am the hearer. So, in my absence, whether it makes a sound or not is immaterial. That's why we don't say Vedanta is scientific. Vedanta is a means of knowledge. It has something to say, which other means of knowledge, including inference, upon which science is based, it doesn't touch. So when you say that, of course it makes a sound, we are not concerned with whether, of course it makes a crashing sound, we are not concerned with that. We go one step beyond and ask a very pertinent question. Is a sound if it is not heard? And we are not just talking of a pair of ears, because that pair of ears is again inert, coming under what? Coming under anatma, not I. I'm introducing one more word here. Anatma, not I. And that pair of ears is connected to the mind, which is again observable. So anything that is objectifiable, in other words, anything that is comes under the rubric of preyas, is now called anatma. Both are synonyms, not I. Anything that I can observe. So the pair of ears are connected to the mind, which cognizes the sound. Mind also is anatma because I can observe the mind. And the mind is identified and closely connected to the ahankara, the ego, also known as the I notion. And the I notion is what? The I notion is also observable. Oh, I feel hurt. Whenever the I notion connects to the emotions, connects to the body, connects, identifies with the mind, that is how it is discernible. But then you end up in the witness of the sound. The witness of the sound does not need to be witnessed. This is the thing. So everything needs to be cognized by you. Sound cognized by you, evident to you. The pair of ears that are cognizing the sound, evident to you. The mind which says it is a crashing sound, evident to you. And the ahankara which says, aha, I am now the hearer, evident to you. But that content of the ahankara, the truth of all this, the I, evident to you. In other words, there is no other I to say you exist. You have a birth certificate, all right. When you are born, you are given a birth certificate, but you do not have a certificate of existence. And if you go to any country, if you go to the Social Security equivalent office in any country and say, I need a certificate of existence, they will laugh at you. Because what? You yourself are the proof of your existence. Your existence is swatas siddha, self evident. And if the Upanishad is revealing you as Shreyas, as that limitless reality which never comes to an end, which is really what you want, which promises freedom from sorrow and strife, then what does that mean? If that Shreyas is you, self evident, you are self evident, and if Shreyas, that timeless, spaceless, objectless, limitless I, which is the object of delight, which we cannot even say object, we have to use the words very, very carefully. So I take back that word, which is the subject of delight, subject of happiness, subject of joy, that is already evident. And here is where the problem is. The self evident I has gone off in search of Shreyas, because now the self evident I knows that everything that needs to be cognized, the pursuit of everything that needs to be cognized, is what? Is finite. It's a finite pursuit, ends in despair. Everything that is called as prayers ends in hopelessness. Prayers, pursuits are dead end, leaving me deadened, bored, tired, exhausted, and questioning my sanity. This much now the person of discrimination knows. The person equipped with viveka, discrimination, knows. So now the person has to make a U turn, just like you made a U turn in the strange city when you went and saw this dead end board, sign, road sign. I called it bored because it leaves you bored. That's why. And then, so this dead end board, you see, you turn back. Similarly, here also, that viveka, that discrimination makes you turn away from preyous pursuits. But then, if this viveka, that the pursuit of this I, in other words, the pursuit of Atma, I, in other words, the pursuit of Shreyas, the limitless I, Satchidananda I, the only thing that is existent, Sat, that which is all knowledge, meaning it knows it is. It is self aware, it is self evident. Everything else becomes evident to it, but it doesn't need to be cognized or objectified. and because of which it is a source of limitlessness, because of which it is a source of happiness, joy, and all this I have to understand. It needs a lot of blessing. So we talked about one kind of blessing, Daivanugraha, Bhagavan's Anugraha, your own punya from previous and this life. Punya means the results of meritorious actions, actions that are in line with dharma. So the results of these actions come and bring forth the awareness, the discrimination that I have to drop these pursuits in order to be free. But it's not enough to drop the pursuits because there is a problem. If you ask the question, who am I? What answer comes? Idiot, unlovable, insecure, full of problems, indebted to so and so, sick. You know, I'm as good as the body, I'm as good as the mind, I'm as good as the senses. So, very interesting because Shreyas pursuit is mixed up in prayers as though. Because there is an identification with the body, with the mind, with the senses. And so, therefore, we can say that the I is half known. Are you here? Yes. Do you exist? Yes, of course I exist. And I don't need another source of existence to ratify that I exist, the fact that I exist. Then, what is the nature of you? Ah, that I don't know. You see, here is the mix up. I know I am, but please don't ask the next question, who are you, what are you? Because the answers that come are frightening. I'm as good as this body. Dehoham. I'm as good as my breathing, pranoham. Manasoham. I'm as good as the mind. Manasoham. And you keep saying Manasoham, Pranoham, Dehoham, and you end with Ho hum. That is what the whole life is. It's a humdrum ho hum. And so, what is Vedanta? It's a journey from ho hum to so hum. That Bhagavan, that Brahman alone I am. And therefore, one needs help. You cannot do this on your own. Shreyas pursuit cannot happen, first of all, needs some initiative. So you, as the student, bring the initiative. And the teacher lights up that initiative, activates that initiative, and by sharing the knowledge, blesses that initiative to find its end. That's why Om Namo Bhagavate Brahma Vidyacharyaya Nachiketasecha. Both are exalted. The teacher is exalted, of course, and the student is, of course, exalted. Because here there is a beautiful synergy. You take the lamp of the desire to be free, mumuksha, and it's a flickering lamp coming under the spell of the winds of misfortune. And all the winds of prayers are threatening to put it out. And you say, Guru, please help. It's a tiny little light that's almost going away. And just seeing the compassionate glance of the Guru, the winds of prayers run away. And the lamp shines brightly. And what does the Guru do? Puts the oil of the Upanishad and helps the lamp to just continue with the teaching. So this is what is important. They hear. This is, this cannot be. Even though the desire to be free, one has to initiate. But that desire to be free is culminated, is it reaches its end in the in the teaching that you are already free. There is no other way to find out. Guru Upasadanam, approaching the teacher. Very, very, very important. Because without a teacher, without some help, we cannot come out of prayers. One cannot come out of prayers. Why? Because of the contradictions I mentioned earlier. The seeker is you, the sought is you. So, therefore, that which is sought, being not an object, is not available to the seeker to be able to discern and seek. Secondly, the seeker is oriented towards seeking only objects in time and place. The seeker is not oriented towards seeking the self. Therefore, some help is needed. This is both a blessing as well as a a possible area for trepidation, because the self being so intimately connected to I, so intimately, to me, I don't want to give the charge of knowing the self to someone other than myself. But that is where some maturity should come. Just like Nachiketa had that. Let us see that in the next class, I think in the morning. ॐ पूर्णमदः पूर्णमिदं पूर्णात् पूर्णमुदच्यते पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते ॐ शान्तिः 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 हरिः ॐ श्रीगुरुभ्यो नमः हरिः ॐ. Thank you.